5 years after leaving the Navy SEAL teams, Logan Pierce had built a life around one simple rule: no dogs. Most people assumed it was because he preferred being alone. That wasn't true. The truth was harder to explain. There had been a night overseas that changed everything. A night Logan never talked about. A night that made him believe that getting attached was the fastest way to lose something. So he kept his distance. From people. From neighbors. From anything that might matter. Then, on a warm August evening in Fort Collins, Colorado, a tiny German Shepherd puppy appeared outside his apartment door. It wasn't barking. It wasn't scratching. It simply lay down in front of the one person who wanted nothing to do with it. Across the hallway, a young waitress named Emma Brooks watched the whole thing unfold. At first, she thought Logan would do what he always did: close the door, walk away, forget it ever happened. Instead, something unexpected happened. The former Navy SEAL stood there for a very long time. Then he opened the door wider, and that single decision would change 4 lives before the summer was over. Before we begin, have you ever met an animal that seemed to choose you? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you'd like to help us keep sharing stories like this, consider subscribing. It may seem small, but it means more than you know. Summer was beginning to loosen its grip on Fort Collins, Colorado. The afternoons were still warm enough for open windows, but cooler air had started drifting down from the foothills after sunset. By the last week of August, people could feel autumn waiting somewhere just beyond the horizon. Logan Pierce spent most mornings with a toolbox in the back of his truck. That Thursday was no different. Just after 8 o'clock, he was tightening the hinges on a gate behind a small duplex near City Park. The homeowner chatted while he worked, mentioning grandchildren, rising grocery prices, and a neighbor who refused to trim a tree hanging over the fence. Logan listened politely. When the gate swung smoothly again, he accepted payment, thanked the man, and left before the conversation could stretch any further. That had become his preferred distance from the world. Close enough to be useful, far enough to avoid becoming involved. By late afternoon, he was back at the apartment complex where he had lived for nearly 3 years. The building wasn't remarkable. 2 floors, 12 units, faded brick walls that held heat during the day and released it slowly at night. Most residents stayed because the rent remained cheaper than newer developments across town. Logan carried his toolbox upstairs and unlocked his apartment. Inside, everything sat exactly where it belonged. His work boots rested beside the door. The kitchen counter was clear. The living room held only a couch, a chair, and a bookshelf. Nothing about the apartment suggested a man who planned to stay forever. Across the hallway, Emma Brooks was leaving for work. She almost collided with Logan as she pulled her apartment door shut. "Sorry," she said, adjusting the apron tucked beneath her arm. "You're fine," Emma smiled. Logan nodded once. That was the entire conversation. It was also one of the longest conversations they had shared all month. Emma worked at the Silver Grill diner near downtown. Most days she left before dinner and returned long after dark. Logan knew this not because they talked, but because apartment living made people familiar with one another's routines. He knew she worked hard. He knew she often carried home leftovers. He knew she watered the flowers outside the building when nobody else remembered. Beyond that, he knew very little, and that suited him. 5 years earlier, Logan had left the Navy. Some men talked about military service often. Others never did. Logan belonged firmly to the second group. The people who hired him knew he had served. The people who lived nearby probably guessed. But nobody knew much more than that. That was intentional. There were parts of his life that stayed buried because digging them up served no purpose. At least that was what he told himself. That evening, Logan heated leftover chili and ate standing at the kitchen counter. Through the open window above the sink, he could hear distant traffic, a lawn sprinkler somewhere across the street, and children laughing in a nearby park before their parents called them home. The sounds belonged to ordinary lives. He found them strangely comforting. When darkness finally settled over Fort Collins, he washed his bowl, locked the door, and settled into the quiet that usually filled his evenings. Then a dog barked outside. The sound wasn't unusual. Someone in the neighborhood owned a Labrador that barked whenever bicycles passed. Yet Logan felt his shoulders tighten before he could stop it. For a brief moment, another sound layered itself over the bark. Radio static, boots against gravel. A voice speaking urgently through an earpiece. The memory vanished almost as quickly as it arrived. Logan stared through the kitchen window for a few seconds before forcing himself back to the present. Outside, the neighborhood remained peaceful. Nothing was wrong. The barking eventually stopped. The silence returned. Just before 11, Emma came home. Logan heard her footsteps in the hallway. A few moments later, he heard keys rattling against a lock. Then everything went quiet again. The night drifted onward. A little after midnight, Emma happened to be standing near her living room window when she noticed movement near the apartment entrance. At first, she assumed it was a raccoon. The complex occasionally attracted them, but the shape moved differently, slower, unsteady. Curious, she stepped closer to the glass. A puppy emerged beneath one of the parking lot lights. Its black and tan coat looked dusty. Its oversized ears seemed too large for its small head. The puppy paused, glanced around, and continued toward the building. Emma frowned. No leash, no owner, no collar that she could see. A few minutes later, she stepped into the hallway. The building felt unusually quiet. The puppy appeared at the top of the stairs shortly afterward. It climbed each step carefully, stopping several times as though gathering strength. Something about it didn't seem right. Not injured, just exhausted. Emma crouched slightly. "Hey there." The puppy looked in her direction. For a moment, she thought it might approach. Instead, it continued down the hallway. It stopped at one apartment door, sniffed, moved on, stopped at another, moved on again. Emma watched with growing curiosity. The puppy passed her apartment completely. Then it reached the final unit on the floor. Logan's. For reasons neither Emma nor the puppy could have explained, it settled there. Its small body lowered onto the carpet. Its head rested against the threshold, and there it stayed. Emma stood motionless. Inside apartment 2F, Logan heard a faint scratching sound. He ignored it the first time. The second time, he set down the book he had been reading. The third time, he walked to the door. When he opened it, the hallway light spilled across the floor. The puppy lifted its head. Neither moved. Across the hall, Emma remained silent. She suddenly felt as though she were witnessing something private. Logan looked down at the little German shepherd. The puppy looked back. The hallway seemed strangely still. Then a memory brushed against the edge of Logan's mind. Not a complete memory. Only fragments. A military working dog. A dark hillside. A decision made in seconds. Consequences that lasted far longer. The familiar weight settled briefly in his chest. Logan's expression hardened. Without a word, he stepped back and closed the door. Emma stared at the wood panel in disbelief. Part of her had expected exactly that response. Another part had hoped she was wrong. The puppy remained outside. It didn't bark. It didn't scratch. It simply lowered its head again, as though it had nowhere else left to go. Emma took a step forward. If Logan wasn't going to help, she would. Before she reached the puppy, a sound came from inside Logan's apartment. A drawer opening, footsteps, then silence. Several seconds passed. The lock clicked again. The door slowly opened. Logan stood there holding an old towel. His face revealed nothing, but he didn't close the door this time. He looked at the puppy for a long moment, as if arguing with someone only he could hear. Then he crouched beside it. Logan hadn't planned what to do if the puppy actually stayed. That became obvious almost immediately. The little German shepherd tried to stand when Logan crouched beside it, managed 2 shaky steps, and promptly lost its balance. Emma covered a smile with one hand. The puppy looked offended by gravity itself. "Easy there," she whispered. Logan wrapped the old towel around the small body and carefully lifted it. The puppy weighed almost nothing. Beneath the dusty fur, he could feel every rib. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Inside his apartment, he placed the puppy on another towel near the kitchen. The puppy blinked up at him. Logan stepped back. The puppy took 3 unsteady steps forward. Logan stepped back again. Emma watched the exchange from the doorway. "You know," she said, "I think he likes you. He doesn't know me. Neither do most people." Logan gave her a look. Emma smiled. For the first time that evening, he almost smiled back. Almost. They found a bowl for water. The puppy drank as though it had crossed a desert. Then it fell asleep halfway through drinking. Emma and Logan exchanged a glance. Neither of them said what they were thinking. The little dog had clearly been on its own for longer than it should have been. By 1 in the morning, Emma finally headed back across the hall. "Knock if you need help," she said. "I'm not keeping him." "Of course you're not." The way she said it made Logan suspicious. The puppy slept through the night. Logan did not. Twice he got up to check whether it was still breathing. The second time he caught himself doing it and stood in the dark kitchen feeling ridiculous. At 38 years old, after years in the military and years after Ward building a quiet life, he was standing barefoot in his kitchen worrying about a puppy. The realization irritated him. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the apartment window. The puppy was awake. It was also attempting to climb onto the couch. The attempt ended badly. The puppy slid backward, landed on its rear, looked confused, and immediately tried again. Emma arrived carrying 2 coffees. She stopped in the doorway. Well, he's determined. The puppy made another attempt. Another failure. Another attempt. Emma laughed. He's got no quit in him. Logan watched silently. Something about the stubborn little animal reminded him of young recruits trying to prove they belonged. The puppy finally managed to get one paw onto the couch before slipping again. Emma crouched beside it. You know, we can't keep calling him the puppy. Logan immediately shook his head. Don't. Don't what? Name him. Emma looked up. Why? Because names made things harder. Because names turned temporary things into permanent things. Because names made loss more personal. Logan didn't say any of that. It's unnecessary. Emma glanced at the puppy. The little dog was already attempting another climb. Seems necessary to me. The puppy finally reached the cushion. A second later, it rolled off the other side. Emma laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. Even Logan looked away to hide a brief smile. The puppy scrambled upright and immediately started exploring again. It moved from one corner of the apartment to another as if mapping unfamiliar territory. Checking, investigating, learning. Like a tiny scout, moving ahead of everyone else. The word arrived before Logan could stop it. Scout. Emma looked over. What? Logan nodded toward the puppy. Scout. The puppy happened to look up at that exact moment. Emma's smile widened. Scout it is. Logan regretted speaking almost immediately, but the name stayed. And somehow the apartment felt different after that. The following days settled into a rhythm neither Logan nor Emma had planned. Scout spent most of his time in Logan's apartment, partly because he had arrived there, partly because every time Emma tried taking him across the hall, Scout eventually wandered back to Logan's door. The puppy's growing confidence created new problems. One morning, Logan stepped out of the shower and discovered half a roll of toilet paper spread across the living room like fresh snowfall. Another day, Scout stole a shoelace and proudly paraded through the apartment as though he had captured enemy territory. Twice he managed to knock over his water bowl. Once he fell asleep inside Logan's toolbox. Emma often arrived just in time to witness the aftermath. You know he's winning, right? She said one evening while helping clean up shredded paper towels. Nobody's winning. Pretty sure Scout is. The puppy chose that exact moment to fall asleep against Logan's boot. Emma raised an eyebrow. Logan pretended not to notice, yet little things began changing. Without thinking about it, he started checking pet supply aisles whenever he visited hardware stores. He found himself researching what puppies could and couldn't eat. One afternoon, he returned home carrying a chew toy. When Emma pointed it out, he immediately claimed it was practical. He's chewing everything else. Of course, Logan ignored her grin. The problem wasn't Scout. The problem was what Scout represented. Every day the puppy became more familiar. Every day Logan became more attached. And every day he felt something he hadn't expected. Fear. Not fear that Scout would hurt him. Fear that Scout mattered. One evening, after Emma had gone back to her apartment, Logan sat alone on the couch while Scout slept nearby. The puppy's breathing was soft and steady. The apartment felt warmer than usual, less empty. That realization unsettled him. Because emptiness had been manageable, predictable, safe. He thought about the years after leaving the Navy, the rules he had built, the distance he maintained, the careful life he had assembled from routine and silence. Scout didn't understand any of those rules. He simply existed. And somehow that made Logan lower his guard a little more each day. The next evening, Logan knocked on Emma's door. When she opened it, Scout immediately trotted inside as though he already knew where he was going. Emma looked from the puppy to Logan. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Logan cleared his throat. I've been thinking. Emma waited. He should stay with you. Her expression softened. Logan continued before she could respond. You're better with him. Logan, he needs consistency. The explanation sounded reasonable, logical, responsible. Exactly the sort of explanation Logan preferred. Emma knew better. She could see it in his eyes. This wasn't about Scout needing a home. It was about Logan becoming afraid of how much he cared. The puppy circled Emma's feet and sat down. For a moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Emma nodded. If that's what you want. Logan looked away first. Neither of them mentioned the fact that Scout had already fallen asleep beside Logan's boot less than an hour earlier. And neither of them said what they were both thinking. That sometimes the hardest thing to admit wasn't love. It was needing something at all. The first 2 days after Scout moved into Emma's apartment were surprisingly quiet. Too quiet. Logan finished a fence repair on the north side of town, drove home, made dinner, and sat alone at his kitchen counter. The routine should have felt familiar. Instead, something felt missing, not important, just noticeable, like a clock that had stopped ticking in another room. On the third day, he saw Emma carrying Scout down the hallway. The puppy spotted him immediately. Its entire body lit up. The reaction annoyed Logan more than it should have. "Looks like somebody remembers you," Emma said. Scout wiggled in her arms. Logan shrugged. "He's a dog." Emma smiled. "Of course." The next morning, Emma knocked on his door. When Logan opened it, Scout was sitting beside her. "I've got a double shift." Logan immediately knew where the conversation was heading. "No," Emma sighed. "I'll be gone 12 hours. "No, he'll spend the whole day alone." Logan folded his arms. Emma looked down at Scout. Scout looked up at Logan. Neither of them appeared willing to leave. 20 minutes later, Scout was sitting in Logan's apartment chewing on a tennis ball. Logan blamed himself for that outcome for the rest of the day. The arrangement repeated itself the following week. Then the week after that. Whenever Emma worked long shifts, Scout spent the day with Logan. The puppy quickly decided this was an excellent system. Logan disagreed, at least officially. One afternoon, he returned from a repair job and discovered his electric bill missing. After 10 minutes of searching, he found it beneath the couch. A corner had been chewed completely off. Scout watched proudly from nearby. "You ate a bill." The puppy wagged his tail. "You don't even know what a bill is." The tail wagged faster. Another afternoon, Logan spent nearly an hour looking for a missing sock. He eventually found Scout carrying it through the apartment like a hunting trophy. A week later, Scout managed to pull an entire roll of paper towels across the kitchen floor. The mess stretched from one end of the apartment to the other. Logan stood in the middle of it. Scout sat nearby. Both seemed equally surprised by the result. The puppy's greatest achievement came during a woodworking project. Logan had been building a small side table for a customer. After carefully measuring and cutting every piece, he stepped away for less than 5 minutes. When he returned, Scout had somehow acquired one of the wooden supports and was enthusiastically chewing it. The project required an extra day's work. Scout required absolutely no apology. Emma laughed so hard when she heard the story that she nearly spilled her coffee. "You were a Navy SEAL. Yes. You survived combat. Yes. And now you're losing battles against a 15-pound puppy." Logan looked at Scout. Scout looked pleased with himself. Emma's laughter only got worse. The strange thing was that Logan didn't mind hearing it. As September arrived, a rhythm developed. Emma worked. Logan worked. Scout wandered between those worlds. The puppy waited by Emma's door when she left each morning. Then he spent the day following Logan around the apartment like a furry shadow. If Logan moved to the kitchen, Scout followed. If Logan sat on the couch, Scout climbed beside him. If Logan worked at the table, Scout slept beneath the chair. Sometimes Logan would look down and find the puppy asleep on one of his boots. Other times he would discover Scout curled up on his old military jacket. The jacket had spent years untouched in the closet. Now it seemed permanently occupied. One evening, Emma arrived after work and found Scout sleeping beside Logan on the couch. A book rested open in Logan's lap. The television wasn't on. Neither of them had noticed Emma enter. She stood quietly in the doorway for several seconds. The scene felt strangely peaceful. Logan eventually looked up. Scout immediately woke and ran toward Emma. "You two had a good day?" she asked. Logan shrugged. He slept most of it. Emma noticed a new chew toy on the floor. The day before, there had been a different one. The week before that, another. She noticed other things, too. A bag of high-quality puppy food near the pantry. A veterinarian brochure on the counter. A notebook with feeding schedules written neatly inside. The next week, she discovered a puppy care guide tucked between 2 woodworking magazines. Logan caught her looking at it. "It's practical information." "Of course it is." Someone has to know what he's supposed to eat. Emma nodded. Naturally, Logan immediately regretted saying anything. The smile she gave him lingered long after the conversation ended. Despite all of it, he continued insisting Scout wasn't his responsibility. Every new toy had a practical explanation. Every act of concern had a logical reason. Every attachment came with a disclaimer. Yet the evidence kept accumulating, and so did something else: fear. It arrived quietly, not every day, not even most days, but sometimes, usually late at night, Logan would find himself watching Scout sleep. The puppy's chest rose and fell steadily, completely trusting, completely unaware. The sight brought back feelings Logan had spent years avoiding. Not memories exactly. The emotions connected to them: responsibility, attachment, the possibility of loss. One Saturday afternoon, Scout fell asleep with his head resting across Logan's boot while sunlight streamed through the living room window. The apartment felt warmer than it had in years. The realization landed harder than expected. For a long moment, Logan simply sat there staring out the window. He thought about routines, about distance, about the rules that had helped him survive the years after leaving the military. Rules existed for a reason, and somewhere along the way, Scout had begun breaking all of them. The following Tuesday, Emma arrived to pick up the puppy before heading to work. Scout trotted toward the door automatically. Logan knelt and clipped on the leash. For a second, his hand rested on the puppy's neck. Then he stood. "Emma," she looked up. "Yeah?" Logan took longer to answer than he intended. "I think we should stop this." Her expression softened slightly. "Stop what?" "Bringing him over here." Scout sat between them, completely unaware of the conversation. Logan looked away first. "He needs one home." Logan. "He needs consistency." The explanation sounded reasonable. It even sounded responsible. Emma recognized it for what it was: a shield. A way to retreat before caring too much became impossible to deny. She could have argued. She could have pointed out the notebook, the toys, the puppy food, or the fact that Scout followed Logan everywhere. Instead, she simply nodded. "If that's what you think is best." Relief should have followed. It didn't. As Emma led Scout back across the hallway, the puppy glanced over his shoulder once before disappearing through her apartment door. The hallway became quiet again. Logan stood there for several seconds, staring at the closed door. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt less like peace and more like something he had chosen to lose. The hallway felt strangely empty after Scout stopped coming over. For the first few days, Logan told himself that was a good thing. The apartment was quiet again. No chew toys under the couch. No small paws tapping across the floor at 6 in the morning. No sudden barking in the middle of the night because a shadow had moved outside the window. Everything was back where it belonged, exactly the way it had been before, exactly the way he had wanted it. At least that was what he kept telling himself. The trouble was that the silence no longer felt peaceful, it felt noticeable. Several times Logan caught himself looking toward Emma's apartment when he stepped into the hallway. More than once he nearly asked how Scout was doing. Each time he stopped himself. The puppy was fine. Emma was taking good care of him. There was no reason to ask. No reason to care. Yet he still found himself listening for sounds that no longer came. One evening, he opened his closet and discovered a chew toy Scout had somehow pushed beneath a shelf weeks earlier. For a moment, he simply stood there staring at it. Then he shut the door. The following Saturday, Fort Collins settled beneath a cool, late summer evening. Logan spent most of the day repairing a porch railing for an elderly couple across town. By the time he returned home, the sky had already darkened. He heated leftovers, watched part of a baseball game, tried not to notice how quiet everything felt. Around 10:30, Emma was still at work. The diner had been unusually busy. A football game at the local college had filled half the city with hungry customers. By the time she finally locked her car and climbed the apartment stairs, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. She unlocked her door and stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was what she didn't hear. No pause, no excited scrambling across the floor, no happy greeting. Her smile faded. Scout! The puppy didn't come running. Emma set down her purse and walked deeper into the apartment. Scout was lying on his blanket near the couch. When he saw her, he lifted his head slightly. His tail moved once, then he lowered his head again. A knot formed instantly in Emma's stomach. The food bowl nearby was almost untouched. The water bowl looked barely disturbed. She knelt beside him. "Hey, buddy." Scout blinked slowly. Something wasn't right. Within seconds, she was back in the hallway. She crossed directly to Logan's door and knocked. The door opened almost immediately. One look at her face was enough. What happened? I don't know. The words came out faster than she intended. He's barely moving. Logan was already walking past her before she finished speaking. When he entered Emma's apartment and saw Scout lying there, every remaining excuse disappeared. The puppy looked tired, not critically ill, not injured, just wrong. Logan knelt beside him. Scout lifted his head weakly. For reasons he couldn't explain, that simple movement frightened him more than if the puppy had been crying. Without another word, he slid one arm beneath Scout and carefully picked him up. Let's go. The veterinary clinic was only 15 minutes away. It felt much longer. Emma drove. Logan sat beside her with Scout wrapped in a blanket across his lap. Neither spoke much during the drive. Every few minutes, Logan looked down. Every few minutes, he checked that Scout was still awake. The clinic's waiting room was nearly empty when they arrived. A young veterinary technician took Scout immediately into the treatment area. Then came the waiting. Emma had never seen Logan like this. He couldn't sit still. He sat down, stood up, walked to the window, returned to his chair, checked the clock, looked toward the treatment room, then repeated the entire cycle. The calm, controlled man she had known for over a year seemed to have disappeared. Hours passed. Emma tried to stay awake. She really did, but she had worked nearly 12 hours that day. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The waiting room remained warm and quiet. Sometime after 2 in the morning, exhaustion finally won. She fell asleep in the plastic chair beside him. When Emma opened her eyes again, the digital clock on the wall read 3:07 a.m. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. The clinic. Scout. Logan. She turned her head. Logan was exactly where she had left him. A paper cup of coffee sat untouched beside his chair. His eyes were red. His shoulders looked heavier than usual. Yet he remained focused on the treatment room door, as though moving away might somehow make things worse. Emma studied him quietly. In all the months she had known him, she had never seen him look at another living thing the way he looked toward that door. Not once. And in that moment, she understood something. Logan had not started caring about Scout tonight. He had been caring for a very long time. Tonight was simply the first night he could no longer hide it. A few minutes later, the veterinarian finally appeared. Both of them stood immediately. The doctor smiled. Good news. The tension in Logan's face eased slightly. He's going to be fine. Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The veterinarian explained that Scout wasn't suffering from any serious illness. The puppy was mildly dehydrated and showing signs of stress-related exhaustion. After fluids and several hours of monitoring, he was already improving. We see this sometimes with younger dogs, the veterinarian explained, especially when routines change. Logan nodded slowly. The words landed harder than the doctor realized. When the veterinarian left, silence settled between them. A comfortable silence this time. Scout was safe. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Emma looked at Logan. What are you really afraid of? The question hung in the air. Logan stared down at his hands. For so long that Emma thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet. Losing something after I convinced myself I'd have more time. Emma didn't ask him to explain. She didn't need to. The answer carried enough weight on its own. And for the first time since she had known him, Logan didn't immediately pull away from the conversation. The rest of the night passed more peacefully. Shortly after sunrise, the clinic staff began completing paperwork for Scout's discharge. One of the technicians paused while reviewing his file. Did you know he has a microchip? Emma blinked. No, the technician smiled. Let's see if it's registered. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a tablet. Her expression had changed, not worried, surprised. We found an owner. Emma and Logan exchanged a glance. The technician looked down at the screen. The registered owner is Margaret Hale. She tapped the address. She lives less than a mile from here. Another moment passed. Then she added, 82 years old. The words should have felt like a victory. The mystery solved. The puppy belonged to someone. The story should have ended there. Emma smiled with relief. But Logan remained silent. Because somewhere between the long nights, the ruined socks, the chewed-up bills, and the hours spent worrying in a veterinary waiting room, Scout had stopped being a stray puppy. And the thought of giving him back suddenly felt much harder than it should have. The drive home from the veterinary clinic felt different. Scout slept most of the way back. wrapped in a blanket across Emma's lap. The puppy was safe. That should have been enough. Instead, a different weight followed them home. A name, Margaret Hale, an address. A person waiting somewhere nearby without knowing her missing puppy had been found. Neither Logan nor Emma said much about it that morning. The conversation could wait. The reality could not. By Sunday, Scout seemed fully recovered. His appetite had returned. His energy had returned. His talent for causing minor chaos had returned as well. He managed to steal one of Logan's socks before breakfast. That felt strangely reassuring. Late that morning, Logan clipped the leash onto Scout's collar. Emma grabbed the bag containing his toys, blanket, food, and the small collection of things they had accumulated over the past several weeks. Looking at the pile made something tighten in Logan's chest. Emma noticed. She didn't mention it. Margaret Hale lived in a small white house near the end of a quiet street lined with mature maple trees. The yard was neat. The porch swing looked old but well cared for. Flower pots sat beneath the windows. The place felt lived in, loved. Margaret opened the door before they reached the porch. She was smaller than Logan expected. Silver hair, gentle eyes, the kind of face that seemed permanently shaped by kindness. Then she saw Scout. A hand flew to her mouth. Oh my goodness. Tears appeared instantly. When Logan released the leash, Scout trotted toward her. Margaret dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around him. For several seconds she couldn't speak. The puppy licked her cheek. Margaret laughed and cried at the same time. I've been looking for you everywhere. Eventually, she invited them inside. The living room walls held family photographs and faded holiday cards. The house carried the scent of cinnamon and old wood. Over coffee, Margaret explained what had happened. A month earlier, she had visited a rescue center after losing her elderly dog. The silence in the house had become too much. Scout had arrived only days later. On his very first night, a gate in the backyard hadn't latched properly. By morning, he was gone. Margaret searched, posted flyers, called shelters, contacted animal control. Nothing. Until now. I'm so grateful you found him, she said. Logan nodded. It wasn't really us. Emma smiled. It was mostly him. Margaret laughed softly, then Logan began talking. Nobody saw it coming. Not even Logan. He started with food recommendations, then feeding schedules, then sleeping habits, then favorite toys, then the best way to encourage bathroom training. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Emma sat quietly watching. The man who barely spoke to neighbors was giving a detailed presentation on puppy care. Margaret eventually glanced at Emma. Emma was trying very hard not to laugh. Logan noticed both expressions. What? Nothing, Emma said. Nothing at all. Margaret's smile widened. For the first time in years, Logan found himself talking without measuring every word. The realization embarrassed him slightly. Eventually, it was time to leave. Scout's blanket remained folded beside Margaret's couch. His toys sat nearby. Everything was where it belonged. At least that was what Logan kept telling himself. He stood. Emma stood. Margaret walked them to the front door. The goodbye should have been simple. It wasn't. The moment Logan stepped off the porch, Scout followed. The puppy grabbed the cuff of his jeans, not playfully, not briefly. He simply refused to let go. Logan stopped. Scout. The puppy held tighter. Margaret called his name. Nothing. Emma crouched beside him. Still nothing. The puppy's eyes remained fixed on Logan. The three adults stood in silence. Then Margaret slowly straightened. Something in her expression changed. Understanding. She looked from Scout to Logan and back again. The realization seemed to settle naturally, like a puzzle piece finally finding its place. I think, she said quietly, he already decided where he belongs. Logan immediately shook his head. No. Margaret smiled. That's exactly what someone says when a dog has chosen them. The puppy finally released Logan's jeans, only to sit directly beside his boot. Emma covered another smile. Margaret folded her arms. You keep him. Logan stared. I can't do that. Why not? The question lingered. For once, Logan didn't have an answer. Margaret reached down and scratched behind Scout's ears. I wanted a companion. Her eyes moved toward Logan. I think he found someone who needed one more than I did. The arrangement was finalized that afternoon. Scout would stay with Logan. In return, Logan promised to bring him for regular visits. At least once a week. Margaret seemed pleased. Scout seemed even more pleased. The months that followed unfolded quietly. Logan repaired loose steps on Margaret's porch, then a leaking faucet, then a damaged fence section. Somehow there was always one more thing needing attention. Emma started helping Margaret with grocery trips. Occasionally she stayed to cook dinner. Soon, Sunday evenings became routine. 3 lonely people sharing a meal while a German shepherd wandered between them hoping for scraps. Margaret loved every minute of it. One evening, she watched Logan and Emma arguing over the correct way to assemble a bookshelf. Scout slept nearby. The setting sun filled the room with gold light. Margaret smiled to herself. "I got a puppy," she said. The others looked up. "But somehow I ended up with grandchildren." Emma laughed. Logan rolled his eyes. Margaret considered that confirmation. Winter came. Then spring. Life continued moving forward. The following summer brought unexpected news. The owner of the Silver Grill Diner retired and sold the property. Within weeks, the restaurant closed. Emma lost her job. At first, she treated it like a temporary setback. Then the savings account started shrinking. Bills arrived. Rent approached. Worry settled in. Logan noticed long before she admitted it. One evening, after helping Margaret carry groceries inside, he spoke before he could reconsider. "The spare room is still empty." Emma looked at him. Logan looked at the driveway. "You could stay there until things settle down." The offer was simple. No dramatic speech, no grand confession, just an open door. Emma understood exactly how much that meant. A year later, a small wedding took place beneath string lights in Margaret's backyard. A few neighbors attended. Several folding chairs filled the grass. Someone brought homemade pie. Someone else brought flowers. Scout slept beneath the front row during the ceremony, completely unconcerned with the significance of the occasion. Margaret stood afterward with a glass of lemonade in one hand. She looked at the couple, then at the dog, then at the life that had somehow formed around all 3. A smile spread across her face. "I thought I adopted a puppy because I was lonely." She paused. "Turns out he brought me an entire family." As laughter drifted across the backyard and evening settled gently over Fort Collins, Logan looked around at the people gathered there. For years he had built his life around distance, around caution, around the belief that caring too much only led to loss. Now Scout slept at his feet. Emma stood beside him. Margaret sat smiling beneath the porch light, and for the first time in a very long time, the future no longer felt like something to fear. As I think about this story, I keep coming back to the ordinary moments. A puppy asleep on an old jacket, a cold cup of coffee sitting untouched in a veterinary waiting room, a tired waitress coming home after a long shift, an elderly woman setting an extra place at the table because she hopes someone might stay for dinner. It reminds me that loneliness rarely arrives all at once. More often, it grows quietly through routines and empty spaces, and healing often arrives the same way. Not through dramatic changes, but through small acts of kindness repeated over time. What I love most about Logan's journey is that he didn't set out to change his life. He simply opened a door one night. Sometimes that's all it takes. A conversation, a friendship, a second chance. In my own life, I've learned that some of God's greatest blessings don't arrive with fanfare. They arrive quietly, disguised as interruptions, responsibilities, or unexpected companions. If this story reminded you of a pet, a person, or a season of life that changed you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Feel free to share a memory, a prayer, or a thought. And if you enjoy stories about loyalty, healing, and human connection, please consider liking and subscribing. It may seem small, but it truly helps. While this story is fictional, the emotions behind it are very real. Every day, people find family in unexpected places. And somewhere tonight, I like to imagine a porch light glowing, a dog sleeping peacefully nearby, and someone feeling a little less alone than they did yesterday.